Study Section 5. Rights and Duties. Introduction. In this study section, we will examine the concepts of rights and duties with a view to determining how they exist within a political system. Also, we will explore sources, forms, and theories of rights. We will also justify the existence of fundamental human rights. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to define and use correctly the term rights. Point out the sources of rights. Describe at least 2 forms of rights. Appraise the theories of rights. Discuss at least 2 approaches to justification of rights. Highlight at least 7 duties of a citizen. The nature of rights. The genesis of the concept of rights dates as far back as the awareness of social norms. This implies that the origin of the concept and notion rights would differ from one society to another. Rights has been defined as entitlements to or not to perform certain actions or to be or not be in certain states or entitlements that others can not perform certain actions or not be in certain states. Rights constitute the determinant of what actions are permissible and prohibited and which institutions are just. It structures the form of government, the content of law, and the shape of morality as it is currently perceived. To accept certain set of rights is to approve of the distribution of freedom and authority and to endorse a certain view of what may, must, and must not be done. Sources of rights. There are various sources of rights. They range from those that accrue from the nature of its holders, moral dispositions, to those that come from the law. This is the reason for the evolution of natural rights. Rights that accrue from the nature of its holder. Here we have human rights, animal rights, plant rights, etc. Moral rights. Rights guided by moral reasons. This sin innate to human alone. And legal rights. Rights from the law that guides humans, institutions, and society at large. There is a general assumption that rights are wholly applicable to human beings, and this indeed seems to have colored the discourse of rights. Certain scholars conceive rights as entities that have internal structure or elements, hence embarked on the analysis of rights as that which has 2 parts, a description of the internal structure, form, and a description of what rights do for those who owe them, their function. The Ovidian analytical system, named after Wally Ovid, declares the basic ingredients or elements of rights. They are 4: privileges, liberties, claim. Every claim right correlates to a duty. Power and immunity. The Ovidian system has hinted that there may be rights in the presence of any of its elements. At times, these elements may be bound together in a characteristic way to form complex rights. Forms of rights. Active and passive rights. Active rights are rights that accrue from a claim to its holder's own actions, while passive rights are rights that accrue from the regulation of other sanctions. Active right takes the form Y has a right to X. Passive right takes the form Z has a right to Y, X. Negative and positive rights. The holder of a negative right is entitled to non-interference, while the holder of a positive right is entitled to provision of some goods or services. For example, a right against assault is an instance of negative rights, while a right to welfare assistance is a positive right. Some theories of rights. There are certain theories concerning the functions of rights. We have the will theory, the interest theory, the demand theory. The will theory asserts that the function of a right is to give its holders control over another's duty to act in particular ways, to make the right holders a small-scale sovereign. For instance, when I own my house, I exercise my right of sovereignty on it, and by my discretion, I decide who comes into my house. Will theorist seems to establish a link between right and normative control, such that to have a right means to determine what others may or may not do, to exercise authority over a certain domain of affairs. However, the will theory has its own flaws. It cannot account for the entire functions of rights. That is, it does not account for those rights the holders cannot exercise sovereignty over. This renders the theory as a minimal conception of rights. It undermines the incapacitated or incompetent, like infant animals, imbeciles, senile, and comatose adults in the exercise of rights, as they may not be able to lay claim to sovereignty. It leaves no room for privilege, rights, which are not rights of authority over them. In contrast, the interest theory incorporates all this. The interest theory holds that the function of right is to further the right holder's interest. This is to say that an owner has a right, not because owners have choices, but because the ownership makes owners better off. Interest theories of rights include Bentham, Austin, Lyons, Ras, and Kramer. The interest theory also has its pitfall. It displaces the understanding of the notion of right, as it is possible for one to have interest in Y and not have interest to Y. The demand theory is another alternative to the other two theories of functions. Thinkers like Feinberg, Dowell, Skorupski belong here. Claim to right is seen as demand, insisted upon out of embarrassment, shame, compensation, violation of agreements or promises, or non-performance. It also has its own flaw associated with that of the will and interest theory. It incapacitates the incompetent and distorts the definition of right, as it is possible to demand for what one does not have right to. Justification of rights. This raises the question, why rights? Various grounds or bases have been given as justification for ascribing rights: autonomy, need, protection, guarantee of obligation or duty, interest, and so forth. However, there are certain approaches to the justification of rights. Deontological approach, consequentialist approach, contractual approach. The deontologist approach holds that human beings have attributes that makes it fitting to ascribe certain rights to them and make respect for those rights appropriate. Queen's status theory of right is an example of the deontological approach. The consequentialist approach holds that the respect for particular rights is a means for bringing about some optimal distribution of interest. Mill's conceptualization of right, instrumental theory, is an example of the consequentialist approach. These two approaches differ over the justification of ascribing rights. One holds that rights be respected simply because it is fitting to do so, not because of the good consequences that flow from it. A status-based justification begins with the nature of the right holder and arrives immediately at the right, while the instrumental approach starts with the desired consequences, like maximum utility, and works backward to see which rights ascription will produce these consequences. The contractual approach differs from the previous two in the sense that it justifies as rights those principles that have been chosen by proper situated and motivated agents, agreeing to basic terms of their relations. Scallon and Rawls are advocates of this approach. Duties of a citizen. Duties are those things we are expected to do to ourselves or the others within the society. They are more or less obligations which the citizens render in return to the state for the rights they enjoy from the state. According to Etting, 1999, page 30, consequent upon the rights given by the state to all the citizens are by law expected to reciprocate by performing certain duties to the state. The duties expected from the citizens include, but not limited to, the following: 1. To abide by the provision of the Constitution of the state. 2. To be loyal to constituted authority. 3. To refrain from activities that are likely to hinder social, economic, and political development of the state. 4. To respect the law of the state and the rights of fellow citizens. 5. To pay tax regularly. 6. To serve the country in any capacity when called upon to do so. It should be noted that the right of citizens to enjoy their rights is predicated upon the capacity and ability of the state to have the means to provide for them. The problem in most states, especially in Africa, is that citizens want to enjoy rights without performing their duties or rendering their obligations to the state. Rights, it must be emphasized, imply duties, and it is only when rights are accompanied by duties that national development can be guaranteed. Study section summary. In this study section, we examined the notions of rights and duties. We looked at the various sources of rights as encapsulated in natural laws and legal rights. We also considered forms of rights, theories, and justification of rights. The concept of duties was also considered, and we enumerated some of the duties the citizens owe the state. We noted that rights and duties go hand in hand, such that we cannot have rights without duties. The converse also holds. End of study section 5. Thanks for listening.